Welcome to Fathernetics. If this is your first time here, this is the podcast where we center and we focus on all of the energy that we have composed that makes us all the amazing fathers that we are today or we intend to be in the future. So while we don't focus on how to rear your child, right? Things that your child can do, the milestones that will occur in the first couple of years of their lives, we focus more on the father, who you are today, how you've become the man that you are today, and perhaps some of the relationships and connections that you've had in the past that have helped to further that along. It's all about gathering all of that energy, all of that knowledge, all of that expertise, and understanding what we're looking to pass on to our future generations. So in order to make sure that more people get to hear the amazing stories that you are going to share on the Fathernetics podcast, make sure to like and subscribe and comment. Let us know how we're doing. Until then, enjoy the show. All right, Matt, good afternoon. I always have to think about it because in my professional life, I want to say this is my professional life, but this is my play life. But in my professional life, I work across so many different time zones and I never know what to say. I always say good morning and it's like 6 o'clock at night in India somewhere.
Sure.
Which just kind of throws everybody for a loop. And then, as I mentioned before, because our time zones don't change, it screws the whole thing up being in Phoenix. Anyway, thanks for taking the time to join me on my podcast today. I know you and I have been chasing each other for a little bit for good reason. And I will tell you, quite frankly, I was surprised that you responded so quickly. Welcome to Fathernetics, Fatherhood Unfiltered. I'm Jamil. Welcome to the podcast. Like time wise to get into this because I'd have been like 6 months out, especially, where you are and what you're doing.
I mean, the way I do, like the way I purchase things, I'm like, I only want things that are right now. So I'm like, I waited some time to actually like confirm the actual date. But then by the time I scheduled, I'm like, all right, let's do this in the next couple of days or it'll never happen. So yeah, that was sort of what went through my head there.
No, I appreciate it. So I want to start off by asking you all the questions that are pre-dad mode, right? All the fun things that you've done. Have you had, I want to say yes. I think I've seen this on your Instagram. You guys have been on a couple of cruises before, right?
Oh, like 14 or 15. Yeah.
Okay. That's a big number.
We're obsessed, or at least I'm obsessed, but we're both obsessed.
Okay, well, how did that start? And the reason I asked is because I'm into cruises now. My husband did some before we met. We've been together for 22 years now. And I know you guys have are you guys double digits too?
16, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Kudos. Congrats. You're almost there.
Likewise.
How did you get into that? How was that fun?
So my family went on a cruise, my first cruise sometime in high school, like junior year or so. And I just like fell in love with it. I just liked not being connected to the rest of the world and kind of like in that 1 week or however long the cruise is, you kind of build a community with everyone there. And as a high schooler, you've probably seen as you go on cruises, you see all the kids bond and they get together and they become friends. So it's almost like a little mini summer camp where you can just kind of like meet people who are somewhat like-minded and you can bond and become friends, but then you may never see each other again. And that's almost kind of the beauty of it too. Cause you're like, I could be a whole different person. I can do anything and I'll just never see these people again. So
I could tolerate you for this trip, not
There we go. And the service too, just like so kind, the staff or the crew of every cruise that I've been on. So quickly after that, like 6 months later, my friend was going on a cruise and he's the youngest of several. So he's like quite far apart. So it was just his two parents and him. And he was like, oh, I can't be on this cruise just with my parents. He was like, I'm trying to find a friend to go. And I was like, I will absolutely go. And then once Joshua and I got together and started dating, it took him some convincing because he was like, everyone's first critique of a cruise, like being in the middle of the water and
what am I going to do? I'm going to be bored.
Things like, and so there was some fear there. But once I got him to do his first one, he's been hooked ever since. So, now we've been on like 14 or 15 or so.
Okay. Favorite port of call?
St. Lucia. Now,
Ooh.
we splurged for my birthday and we did a private catamaran tour to the what are they called? The Tetons or something like that. Have you heard of these like mountains in St. Lucia?
It sounds familiar. Now I'm gonna have
Sure.
to like Google it right after this.
Sure. They're gorgeous, but we got on this catamaran. We had like the crew to ourselves of this little boat, and we had like unlimited open bar and food and drinks. It was just like wonderful. We went snorkeling. They give us a tour of the island, and so
Okay, I need a link to wherever you went. You're selling it, so
well, I've as you could imagine, I've made TikToks about it too. So maybe I'll send you those. But
yeah, that's fine too.
so we
Or maybe
really
I'll go to go find them. Maybe I'll do that.
sure.
Be a sleuth for a change.
We had a magical experience there. Now, I'm sure you could have a magical experience anywhere where you kind of want to splurge and have a private thing, but that I have good memories of that, and so that's my favorite for sure.
That's awesome. Okay, so on your cruising, right? I think the talk about town is Carnival cruises, the carnival, right? The party, the for lack of a better word, the ratchet, right? Carnival tour, and then you have Royal Caribbean and maybe the others that are a little bit more tamed. Has that been your experience? I will say I've only done Royal Caribbean, so I don't know the others because when we try to get other people to go, we're like, okay, maybe Carnival, and they're like, no, we're not Carnival. Um, so I don't know. I feel like they have a bad rap, but
Sure. Well, the majority of our cruises have been Carnival. I'm a platinum member now. So exciting. And I grew up in Texas in the suburbs of Dallas. I grew up going to Walmart, and like it's one of those places where you can go and I'm going
was
somewhere
it
with this
Walmart or Kmart?
Walmart. We had
Because
Kmart as well,
Kmart
but
doesn't exist anymore, but that's telling
yeah.
us how old we are.
I love that Walmart was 24 hours. You could just go in your pajamas. No one's judging you. You're all there to like not be judged and do what you need to do and get out. And I kind of find, even though they call Carnival the Walmart of the season a derogatory way, I kind of find it the same way where it's like, it's a judgment-free zone. Like we're all there to have a good time.
As you are, yeah.
I haven't experienced any fights or any like behavior that would make me uncomfortable in any way. It's just like people who are kind of like uninhibited by other people's judgment and expectations. When we did Royal, it felt a little bit like, they want to tell other people they went on a Royal Caribbean cruise and like they're like a little
Fair
like
enough. I mean, that's a good sentiment. Yeah.
and not in we still had a good time, don't get me wrong, but and the other thing is like we're always going to find the lowest price thing, and because one of the reasons we love Carnival and cruising in general is that it's such a good value per day, like everything's included, it's all, so we're always going to look for that lowest price thing, and that's why we've racked up so many Carnival cruises. We recently went on a Virgin Voyages cruise though, not as value driven, but definitely
That's adult only, right?
yeah, it is. And it's
Okay.
probably definitely the best cruise we've ever been on. The food was incredible.
No kidding.
Oh, absolutely. Every single meal was absolutely incredible. All the specialty dining is included. So we really loved Virgin. It'll be hard to go back to anything less than, but I can't speak highly enough about Virgin, but also a Carnival.
Well, we're always looking to take other cruises. The last one we took was just a short one. It was a Mexico cruise to all of their different ports. But the one before that, we went to Italy. We sailed out of Civitavecchia
Yeah.
and did the whole Greek Isles and some of the port calls in Italy and Santorini and Mykonos and Turkey. I have to say that right because then someone will call me on it. But we had such a fantastic time. And then we stayed a couple extra days in Rome. I don't know if you've been, but Rome is amazing.
We'd love to go.
The Italian food is to die for also. I feel like food outside of the US is always phenomenal.
Sure.
For a litany of reasons. We can get into that later. But anyway, all right. So before all of that, there was the theater arts. Are
Yep.
you considered a thespian?
I don't know if I'm not a practicing thespian, if so, but Joshua and I actually met in college as theater majors at Baylor University. I graduated in 2011. So
Baylor in Texas?
Baylor Bears.
Nice.
And then moved to New York about a year later because Joshua was a year younger than me. So I stayed in Dallas doing theater in Dallas until Joshua graduated. We moved together to New York. Initially, I was like auditioning, but then having like jobs like waiting tables and managing a cupcake shop. And I was like, ugh, I want to be doing theater all the time. So if that doesn't mean performing 6 weeks out of a year, maybe then I'm like producing or doing other things. So I shifted gears and started working on Broadway as the assistant to Fran Weisler, who's the producer of Chicago and Waitress, among others. And lasted 4 months. It was very Devil Wears Prada. But then we moved to Connecticut because I got a job at Goodspeed Musicals, which is a renowned regional theater there.
Mm-hmm.
That was a year, and then moved back to New York, was doing general management and producing for 2.5 to 3 years, working on several Broadway shows like Hadestown and Anastasia and Oklahoma. And then switched gears entirely to social media advertising, which I don't know if you want me to keep going there, but
No,
yeah.
well, I do want you to keep going, but I do want to ask you, do you miss it at all? Knowing that you've done it, it seems like you've done it for a while, but just kind of stitched it all together.
Sure. So I have two answers to that. One is that I left for a reason. I didn't like, especially on Broadway, everyone seemed to be working for their own end goal, meaning they want the Tony Award for lighting design, or they want to make the most money as an actor in that short time period, or whatever it was. And I was seeing all of this in the general management office because we were negotiating all the deals for everybody. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I really want to be at a place where everyone just has like, is working for the good of the production, if it was a Broadway show, right? Like the good of the Broadway show. And you weren't able to like, one person's department wasn't able to give feedback to make someone else's department better if they had a critique about something. It was very ego driven and everyone out for themselves.
So it's like, how dare you tell me to put a button there?
Or whatever it is. And so I really wanted to be at a place where we were all working toward the same goal. That said, I very much advocate and will say that I use those skills, my theater skills, every single day. A social media audience is the audience, and on the little screen that they're looking at is like a stage, and like where's their attention on that screen? How are we keeping their attention and keeping them engaged? That's one end. From an actor point of view, you're taught your objective, and like you want your acting partner to do something, to get angry or to do something, right? In the same way, in advertising, or even just not advertising, we're just like making social media content. You want your audience to laugh. You want them to comment. You want them to like. You want it to share with their friend. And in the same way, you have an objective and you want to get something out of them. So I put myself in the audience's shoes and I'm like, okay, when would I swipe if I was watching this video? Or what would get my attention? Or what would get me to actually click this and buy this toothpaste? So there's a lot of those same skills that apply here. And some of the best people I work with have a theater background. So I will say that I don't miss the parts that I loved about theater. And I also don't miss the parts because I get to do them every day. And then I also don't miss the parts that I hated because I don't have to deal with that toxicity. So all that to say, no, I don't miss it. And I don't want to go back.
So I know Joshua's in some of the stuff that you put out there. Is he as excited to continue that as well? I know he's an author also, which I think is phenomenal, but for you specifically, it's really what you put out there in social media, which is fantastic. I even think you did a post about how to make that transition, right, from theater arts to what you would consider more of your professional side.
Yeah, Joshua is very much excited in that he definitely sees it as a revenue producing venture long term. And so definitely wants to continue doing that and is more open now that we have our first child here to appear on camera and things like that. Not as obviously as much as me, but he's more open to it now. He definitely obviously he has a performance background as well, and he just kind of to leave that behind initially. I don't want to speak for him. Obviously, we're not interviewing him, but so I don't want him to be like, "Why did you say this?"
All
But
nice things. All nice things.
yeah, so he's a little bit more open to it now.
No, I think that's good. My husband is obviously again 22 years, but he's like, I'm okay. You go forth and conquer, and if you need me, I'll pop my head in like he did for episode 2, and then that's it. We're good. So I respect that. Not everybody's partner wants to be front and center, and if that is a must, then perhaps you know you have to kind of rethink what you're doing.
Totally. And like it is hard because a lot of times when I'm looking at like, all right, what's performing right now? Like what kind of trends or other things can I emulate or recreate in our own way? And a lot of them involve like, all right, well, there's a two people, mom, dad, 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 whatever it is, mom, and maybe a kid. And it's like, well, I have I have some restrictions in my ideas and what I want to make. And so, yeah, you got to kind of work around that a little bit.
So let's get into that. As far as social media is concerned, obviously there was a pivot from what you were making to more into your journey into fatherhood. Who raised their hand first and said, "Hey, this is a conversation we need to have," or "We're ready. Let's start that journey."
Um, it was just a little bit. First, it was the testing baby names. And that was a genuine thing that I was doing. And I was like, I think this would make a good TikTok. So I just made one or three, I think actually, and they performed well. And I was learning what was working and what the audience was saying. And so I just continued doing that series for a while. And then as we began our journey, I don't know if it was like, I think it was like, we're only going to do this once in our lifetime, most likely, right? At least that was the plan. And I want to at least have this for our kids to be able to look back at and see kind of where they came from. And if we don't record this and don't document this, then you can't go back in time and do it. So that was sort of the impetus. Some of that stuff didn't really perform very well. But then once we got our PGT testing results, of like all the embryos and how they were graded and all that, I was like, okay, what is the way that I can kind of like educate and share all of this in like a way that would delight the audience and really I'm not very smart, like in some ways, and so like I have to dumb a lot of these things down just for me to understand. And in a way, I think that really helps the audience too, because then I'm like, all right, if I can just really simplify this in a way that is visually appealing and makes sense, that I would want to explain to myself, then the audience can catch on. And so when I first did that video with there's a blackboard and a bunch of sticky notes on it of kind of like how all the embryos and eggs came to be, that got a lot of views and did really well. And so then I continued a series of like, okay, every time we get an update, let's use these sticky notes on this board to kind of explain what's going on. And so that kind of like, I learned from what I do for a living to just to like build on the momentum of what's working. And so that kind of snowballed from there. And then I've thought along this whole way, like, when does it stop? Do I just like, do we have the kids? And I'm like, all right, shut it all down. Like I'm spending time with now.
No, don't do that.
Um, so that's sort of at the end of the day, it started with wanting something for our kids to watch, but then it became following the momentum of what was working.
So one of the things I tend to ask a lot of people that I have conversations with, mind you, this all started back in May, so it's been quite the journey on the uptick, if you will. How does that conversation start? A lot of people are day one, they're having conversations about this. Date one, date two, they're talking, hey, I want to have kids because I'm an adult now. And if you're not on that path, fine, but let's not waste time. For those of us that have been together for quite some time, that may not come up till halfway through, and hopefully by that time, everybody kind of knows an inkling of where they want to go. And then it just kind of spirals. For me and my husband, we've had our kid for 8 years. We got him through adoption. So that conversation, we already knew we wanted to have kids, but it was kind of in the background somewhere while we were traveling and having fun as single parents, single people. And then we finally sat down and said, now it's time. Right. And then that's where the clock starts, if you will. And this is our internal clock because no one's really clocking anything. And speaking of this process for you guys, surrogacy takes forever. And what you're doing is kind of removing the veil from that. I think a lot of people think, yeah, I'm going to start surrogacy and I'll just put, two pennies together and we'll have a kid in 6 months. And it's like, I'm learning that is far from it.
Yeah.
And so I like the transparency. You use the term dumbing down, but I think that the way that you're explaining it is necessary for all the people that are looking to better understand surrogacy and how it starts and how to, take it in chunks. There are things you can do before you get to the final step. And here's where you need to be. And maybe you need to travel. And why would you consider things like Mexico? All things we'll get into here in a second. But that's all necessary for people to go, okay, now I feel like I know where to start, or I understand where that is. At what point through this journey did you say, okay, this is really making sense and perhaps is now serving a wider need?
The content itself?
Right. Your whole surrogacy journey, right? Because there's like 10,000 components to it.
Totally, totally. I'll back up because you started with like kind of when we decided to have kids. And I will say that like I can't even point to when it exactly happened because we started like we didn't come from a financial place where like this even seemed like a reality. And so especially as theater artists, and then I made the pivot and we really had financial goals first to pay off our student loan debt, to build up some sort of an emergency fund. And so we had financial goals first. And then once we hit those and we were both in a good place where we were making okay money, but like we had momentum in our careers as well, we were like, all right, what's our next goal? And that's when we started like, okay, what's a big goal? And we were looking at prices for adoption and surrogacy and all the ways to build a family. And we were like, okay, this is like probably 5 to 10 years off, but like
It's
if
daunting,
we,
right? It's
yeah.
that sticker shock.
So let's just start saving money. And if we get to the point where we can pull the trigger and make it happen, amazing. And if we decide we don't want to have kids and, whenever we build up that money, then we have however many $100,000 and then we can just like use that for whatever we want. Like it was kind of like a riskless savings account where it's just like, let's save it for this purpose and then we'll decide what to do with it when we actually reach some sort of a goal. And so that's how it started. And then we were every 6 months to a year, we would have a conversation with a few surrogacy agencies in the United States. And we're like, wow, the prices go up like $50,000 every year. And then we were getting to the point where it's like, okay, we can spend $100,000 to create embryos and freeze them and then keep saving until we can continue this process. And we were at the point where it's like, all right, we can actually like pay this. And the prices at that time, this was last summer, 2024, and were about $300,000 per child in the United States. And so our dream was like a $600,000 price tag. And so Joshua was like, okay, hold on. Before we actually like spend any money, let me do a little bit more research. And he discovered.
Can we get a quarter of a child? Can we start? This is not possible.
So at that time, we had about $100,000 where we could like start the process. And so he did some research and via Reddit discovered International Surrogacy, discovered Miracle Surrogacy, which is the agency we're working with.
So I'm
And
glad you went there, like the research that you had to go through, like how did you guys, and I think that's where you're going, how did you guys even start down that path? Because I think a lot of people will try to start and go, well, where do you go?
yeah, I mean, I've never been a Reddit person and he just lives on Reddit all the time. Like
Yeah,
anything
I
he
don't
wants to
understand Reddit.
know, he goes on Reddit. And so he was able to find several threads of like, all right, these look like legit families who are having good experiences. We found some Facebook groups where like intended parents were posting about their successful journeys or even just along the way, like, hey, I'm doing this. Does anyone have any advice? And we're like, all right, there's a community here. There's like proof of concept of like, this is a thing and they have a system down and like, I don't mean it in a way that sounds like a baby factory, but in a way that is like, we can trust that they know what they're doing, that they do this often enough, and that there's a system in place. So we met with 3 different agencies. Well, I say we met. We scheduled meetings with 3 different agencies. One of them kind of ghosted us. The other one felt a little like slimy and weird. Like he lived in England, but he was like running these agencies in Latin American countries, and it just felt not right.
Go with the vibes, man. That's what I say.
So then finally we met with, or actually the first one we met with was Miracle Surrogacy, and they were very communicative, responsive, didn't paint like, hey, everything's going to be perfect. Like they were like, here's what could go wrong. They really talked us through everything, and we felt very safe and secure with them, especially like all the testimonials we had seen online, like separate from what they post themselves. And so that's how we identified this path. Yeah, I mean, as I had mentioned, like it's really like every week I look at, okay, what performed well, what didn't perform well, what are people saying in the comments? And it's really just a matter of like it came from just following the path of what people were asking more questions about. And so like that when people ask questions in your comments, it kind of tells you what to make next. It's almost like creates the content for you. And so, and I also was like, learning alongside them. Like, really, 24 hours before I post a video, I'm educating myself on what the video is about. And so that became like, all right, I'm learning this. If it's helpful to me, I think it'll be helpful to other people. And so then that became just like, this is happening in the process. So let me share about that. And here's the breakdown of that. And so it really was just a matter of, I can't point to a specific moment because it really was like an organic kind of momentum flow of like what was working and what people wanted to know more about.
And I think that points to your success as well, right? Like just looking through, I spent some time over the past couple of weeks looking through your feed. There's not any one specific place that you can point to that's like, okay, we stopped making this and now we're making that. It just happens to just kind of glide into the next chapter of your life, and it feels very natural. I did want to ask about location. A lot of people talk about where and how. Mexico is always a place, the US, Canada, right? A lot of people go down to Colombia. Some people consider the UK. But the legal restrictions, challenges, all this other stuff comes into play. And I'm sure you guys went through your research. I think there was 3 different categories that you guys were really excited to make sure to share with your audience, right? Affordability was one. Your husband's cultural background was definitely one, which I love because I'm from Panama. So I love being able to pull culture into people's family because I think that is probably a big missing component in American culture. I mean, we're the melting pot, but we're trying to pretend like we're not, right? And then of course the ease of some of the legal hurdles that you may or may not have to jump through. So how did you guys get there?
Yeah. So I think just like Joshua's cultural background made it feel a little bit more like it felt home. It felt like home to him. It felt like secure in terms of like Mexico. A lot of people think of it as like, and I don't mean a lot of people, I mean like some people who criticize me in the comments think of it as like a third world country. And it's like, it's not a third world country. In
That's
fact,
because they've never been.
or they just like think bad, they think down on the Mexican Americans in the US who they see as less than them. And so it really, even asking that question of them just kind of shines the light on where they're coming from and their point of view of the world. But it's a very developed country with a great healthcare system, and they don't have the very flawed American healthcare system that we have with all the insurance and all the crazy things, which is truly what has inflated the price of surrogacy in the United States. So it's not that like surrogates are just getting pennies on the dollar compared to those in the US, which of course they are. It is relative to their
Right. Social economics. Right.
absolutely. But the bulk of the price difference comes from healthcare and the affordability of healthcare in Mexico. People come here for cosmetic treatments and other medical things, and they don't think of that as exploitation in the same way that I've been accused of with surrogacy. So the affordability was important. And then number 3, which we didn't even really know until we got further along in the process, and it kind of just became a bonus, but there's something called the Amparo process here in Mexico, which we're in the middle of right now with our first son, to get just our names on the birth certificate and the surrogate's name not on the birth certificate, which means when we get back to the United States, we don't need to do a second parent adoption. We do not need to do any additional like legal paperwork or framework to relinquish her rights because all of that is done through this process. So that has been really like, it's almost easier and better than the process in the United States, which can become like, surrogates can change their mind and like they can decide to keep the baby. There's so many things. And so um, all of these things contributed to us wanting to pursue this path. I will say, had it not been for the affordability, though, we wouldn't have even thought about it. Like that was the main driver. The others are more like icing on the cake.
So you're in Mexico City now.
Correct.
Have you guys visited anywhere else in Mexico? Maybe not this journey, but in the past.
So we did come to Mexico City a year ago to do our semen deposits. Other than that, we've been to Cozumel on cruises, as you can imagine. But we honestly, like on this trip, everyone's like, "Oh, you should go do this and do this." It's like I have a newborn, or I'm
Yeah,
prepared.
that's not the reason we're here.
Yeah, like I'm not on vacation. And so I do think there might be a time like when Dario, who is our first son, is a little right before our second son is born, maybe there could be a weekend something or other, but like we're not planning on it. And like even at home, like we're very much homebodies and like so no, we have not done a lot of exploring. What we wanted to do with this trip really was to try to simulate our home environment in New York as much as we could. So we found an Airbnb that was a little bit more like, in an apartment building with a doorman, and it felt a little bit more like our home environment and just very walkable area where we can walk to restaurants and grocery stores and wherever. And so because we didn't want too much of like a drastic change when we got back to New York, given that we're so new to fatherhood and learning how to parent our children. So that was our main goal, was trying to be as close to a New York City environment as we could.
So a lot of people that I talk to often indicate that they've kind of earmarked a certain timeline to be out of their country, right? You, for example, are in Mexico. Are you adding on to the time that you anticipated being there just because of the rigor of red tape, perhaps? Or do you still anticipate that everything's kind of on track as far as how long you need to be in Mexico?
Our surrogacy agency and the law firm that we're working with have been very transparent of how long these things take. And so without the amparo process, which is completely optional, you don't have to do that. I believe it's a 2 to 3 week time frame which is really like more of the embassy consulate of like getting the passport for the baby and all of that. Our time frame is 6 to 8 weeks after each baby is born. So we are staying through for the whole thing because 6 to 8 weeks after Dario is born is when our second baby is due. And so we will stay through 6 to 8 weeks after our second baby is born to complete that process of the birth certificate and the passports. So that'll be about February. So everything really has been on.
So new residents of Mexico.
There
Welcome.
we go. Everything's really been on schedule. The only thing is that, and funnily enough, just because we have the time, because we have another baby coming, we're not really rushing them along on this first process because we have all the time in the world and we don't need it to be as soon as possible. I'm sure we'll, now that we know how things work, we'll probably try to speed things up after our second baby is born. But right now we're just kind of letting things flow because we're not in any hurry necessarily.
Okay, so tell me the emotion tied to getting the call that says we're ready for you to come down to Mexico for Dario.
So the wildest thing is that our surrogates coordinator. So at the agency, the intended parents have a coordinator. The surrogate has a coordinator to really kind of represent them. They
Right.
mediate with each other and, whatever. And so she says that she's the one in consultation with the doctor who's kind of like estimating the delivery date along the way after every appointment. And for Dario's birth was the first time she ever got it exactly right.
Oh,
So
look at that.
we knew in, I want to say April of like, of when the day he was going to be born. And of course, at that time, it was an estimate. So we got here, they had recommended we get here a week before just to like get
Get
acquainted, get
settled.
in a row. And we've heard from several other families there where it's like, hey, actually, she has to deliver early, get here as soon as possible, so then they're on a plane immediately. Um, our plan just kind of like worked exactly as it was supposed to. So we got here 10 or 11 days before just because we wanted to travel on a weekend. So we didn't have to like take days off work. And then we got acquainted. He was born on the exact day that they said he was going to be born on. So it really,
Was it down to the hour? Did he predict that?
well, because it was a planned C-section. So there were,
Ah, fair enough. So it was. Look at that.
yeah. So, no surprises. And so no major emotions except for the fact that like, obviously lots of emotions on the day of the birth. And honestly, it felt very surreal at first. Like I'm watching a C-section and then they're pulling a baby out. And like, to me at the time, it was just like, I'm just a human randomly in this operating room watching this thing. And then like, this is a baby. And like, it didn't like, everyone talks about this euphoric, like, oh, as soon as they're in your arms, like your whole life changes. And I was like, I don't know, hello, is something wrong? Like, it just like felt
Listen, mine's 12 and I'm still waiting for it. No, I'm just kidding.
like, uh,
I like that you were transparent about that. I did watch that video. I
yeah.
like that you were transparent about that because I think a lot of people have the misconception that it is a aha moment, and I think it eventually is. But there are a couple of things that need to happen. This baby, this whole process is, at least in that final step, is strange, right? Because you weren't carrying the baby and you weren't next to your surrogate for the last 9 months, and so yeah, I like that you were transparent about that.
But let me tell you, like, and part of the reason that does keep driving me to be vulnerable and post things like that is like the number of DMs and comments I got from people saying like, this is totally normal. I carried my baby and it happened to me too. And like all of these things, especially with Dario being in the NICU for a week after he was born, and we were limited to 2 1-hour visitation hours a day. And so really it wasn't until he was home. And even now it's like, yes, I love him. Yes, I'm caring for him. And yes, we're bonding and exploring his personality. But like, it's gradual. I don't think it wasn't a light bulb moment. And I think it's still continuing to happen. And what I loved was the outpouring of people being like, everyone's like, I think it's a lie. People are just saying this and it's not even true. Like everyone goes through this. So really appreciate that from the audience of just kind of like validating those feelings.
Yeah, I think again, there's a layer of intentionality, an additional layer of intentionality for LGBTQ dads because all of these connections are planned, right? It's a lot of paperwork and exercise and backgrounds and this kind of test and that, and by the time you actually have that child in your hand, it could be years. So it's at the end of all of this scaffolding, and now it becomes real. Now it's like, how do I disengage from needing my spreadsheet to now a kid in my hand, right? So I think there's strong value in that. I think a lot of natural parents, if you will, and male, female go through the same process, and some of the ladies go through postpartum, which is a whole different conversation in itself. But I like, again, that you're sharing that because I think a lot of LGBTQ couples need to be able to see that this isn't just, had my kid an hour ago and now we're best friends. No, the kid's learning you're learning the kid, and that's going to go on for the next 30 years.
And what's funny is like this one specifically is my biological son. And I would say that like I kind of feel like my husband's a little bit more bonded than I am, or a little bit more like obsessed and in love. And like I am not obviously, but like, um, And I mentioned this in like an Instagram stories Q&A I did a couple weeks ago where someone asked, do you think you're going to be more bonded to your son and Joshua will be more bonded to his son? I was like, no, actually, I think it'll be the opposite. Like, I'm going to be like, yeah, he's fine to my kid and be like obsessed with the one who, is related to my husband because I'm in love with my husband, of course. So really interesting. And I'm curious to see how it goes once our second son is born. But yeah, lots of emotions and feelings and things that are unexpected.
What a journey. Okay, so do we have a name for your other child, or is that still kind of out there?
We do have a name, but we haven't announced it.
Haven't announced it yet. Okay, fair enough.
It's not a
Cliffhanger.
Fathernetics exclusive.
Cliff out. Fair enough. And it doesn't need to be, hey, that's fine. Okay, so have you guys even considered or have thoughts or plans for when you get back to New York? Have you guys done any pre-planning for that?
Depends on in what way, but
When you go back, are you going to start trying? I know you've got like nursery type stuff, which is
sure,
fine.
yeah.
Um, but is it more of a just slip right back into it, or are there things that are still kind of outstanding that you need to take care of once you get back?
The only thing that's a little bit outstanding, we actually won the affordable housing lottery in New York in 2018. So we are in a luxury high-rise building in Midtown Manhattan for about a third of the price as our neighbors, and which is amazing, and we love it, and we don't want to move.
Do
Now,
they know that?
which part?
Do the
Neighbors?
neighbors know that? Yeah.
Um, I don't know. And we're not the only ones. It's they call them 80-20 buildings. So 20% of the building
Fair enough.
are these affordable units and 80%
Well,
are
congrats.
market rate. Thank you. So the way that works is and like part of the law is you have to if you have 4 people in a 1 bedroom, you're technically being underhoused. And so you are then eligible to join a wait list for a 2-bedroom unit in the same building. If someone in the affordable housing program who's in a 2-bedroom unit moves out. And so the only thing outstanding is we are already on that wait list, but for someone to move out so that we can get a larger home. And that kind of timeline is TBD, not only like how long that would take, but also how long we think we might be able to last in a 1 bedroom before we're like, all right, we're going to need to come up with a backup plan here and move somewhere else. But for now, we think we're okay in a 1 bedroom. We're excited to get back, but
Yeah, kid's gonna be sleeping with you anyway.
yeah, I mean,
Both of them.
you know, we
Both
have
ends.
bassinets in the bedroom, and then we have the cribs in we had to convert our living room to a nursery, so we have cribs in I don't know what to call it, the nursery slash living room, but
It's your space. You can call it whatever you want.
there we go. That's right. I feel like I'm not allowed to call anything what I want because I have like the audience.
Well, someone's got something to say, right? But you know what? At the end of the day, get it right or get it wrong. You know what we're talking about. It's like it doesn't need an appropriate name. Like, come on, we're human. I'm there with you. All right, so let me ask you this: Parenthood journey often produces a parenting style, right? That we may not be aware of until we actually have the child in our arms and are starting to kind of impart knowledge and teach them certain things. Where do you think your fatherhood energy comes from? Do you have a close connection with your dad? And maybe you don't. Maybe that's a little bit different. Not everybody does, right? But regardless of whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, whether your dad is with us without or no longer with us, you are the man that you are today in part because of what your dad shared with you. So where do you think that fatherhood energy comes from? And maybe it's not dad, maybe it's mom. I don't know.
Sure. I can talk about that. I want to start though with like sort of the feelings I've been having initially because I'm obviously like I'm not disciplining yet or like really teaching a whole ton yet, but um I felt a little bit of like I've been shutting down a little bit. Like meaning like I'm like hey, I don't know if I can be this perfect dad that have been talking about this whole time or been thinking about. And I feel like I'm like maybe I'll just like put him down for a nap and then figure it out next time when he's awake. And so like there's times when like it's almost like not imposter syndrome, but just like feeling like wanting to be the perfect dad, but then like feeling insecure about that. And like, uh, I don't know. It's just something I've been kind of grappling with. And like, obviously he's like freaking newborn. Like it's not like that serious right now, but, and I think by the time he's older and we're actually like doing the things you're speaking about, I will have also grown as a human and as a father and as a man. But all that to say, that's sort of like how I'm feeling right now. So even just, and I don't think that relates at all to my dad and how I was fathered necessarily, but my dad, we've gone through chapters. Like we started with he had quite the temper and anger management issues, and I it's weird. It's a double-edged sword where I'm like, I'm so disciplined now and I treat everyone with so much respect. And growing up, everyone would talk about how mature I was and kind and polite. And that is because of the way I was parented. But I wouldn't say it was pretty in any way.
Hmm.
And so that's sort of like something I don't know. I'm like, how do I shape my son to the man that I am? Because I really do appreciate the way I treat other people and my um, character without the the negative things. And like, so how do you train that in a way that's healthy? Um, However, my dad's gone through a few divorces and he's really worked on himself. And in my adult life, he's a much better father than, or I don't know what better is the right word, but different. He's much
Different, sure.
different than he was when I was younger. And I don't know. Part of it was like maybe when I came out, which was after college, and he was more, he was surprisingly extremely accepting and
He's like, I
loving.
knew it.
No, he really truly was. And
Oh,
so,
was he surprised?
no.
No, okay.
And so, but also part of it's like he had a divorce of someone he was very in love with, and so he really took to heart of like the things that maybe she had left him because of, and even now, he's working on himself in men's group and therapy and lots of things, and
Oh,
so
I like that. Very
uh,
progressive of him.
he's definitely changed a lot, um, and so yeah, there's definitely things I've learned to do, not to do. And honestly, like even my marriage, because my dad and my mom are both in their third marriages, and I was part of their first. And I think that's partly why I'm in a long lasting relationship because I learned so much of like what not to do. And so I don't know. It was a long winded answer and went a lot of different directions, but that's sort of where my head's at and trying to take the best of what worked and leave what didn't and figure it out from there.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we slowly start to understand as parents is how much of an impact our kids have on us as individuals and force us to kind of peel back the layers and better understand ourselves. So I think that that kind of questions that you have about yourself, about what kind of dad you want to be, is spot on. And I think it comes from wanting to be a good dad. Because if you didn't want to be a good dad, why would you even worry about that?
Yeah.
So I think it's a good starting point. So, rest in that. I know I can say it and it sounds great, but you're the one that has to kind of rediscover where you want to be. Or I can't even say rediscover, it's just discover.
Sure.
Right. And then every kid is different. So you learn one thing for Dario and then the other one's gonna say no thanks. Let's go in a different direction. So you have that to look forward to. I think that's awesome. So one of the things that we often talk about on Fathernetics is how a lot of our parental skills don't necessarily just come from the fatherhood side, even just the fatherhood components, right? They come from mom as well, or uncles, or a community. Have you started to kind of think about the community that you've built around yourself that would be introduced to your kids, right? A lot of us have friends and families that are great. Some of them are tolerated. And now that you have kids, it's like, oh, your tolerance level for certain people has and will change.
I haven't thought about it in a way that's like who's on the list and who's not on the list necessarily.
Get
However,
that pen out. Ah.
not a bad idea. I do love doing things like that. But we don't really have family local to us in New York. All of our family's in Texas. We do have a lot of friends, but they are all childless. Not in a way that's like they're childless, but
Yeah,
like
I don't have any kids
they're not in
currently.
the they're not in the part of life yet where they necessarily are having children, or maybe they don't want to have children. But um I do think we will or discover a community once they start school and we have more like other parents, at the schools that might join our community. Of course, we love all of our friends and there's no one that I would like, oh, don't want to bring them around, now that we have children. But I do think even just like being invited to things, right? Like I'm like seeing things on Instagram and I'm like, oh, we're not going to get to go to that anymore because we have so I think that'll change our social
So
life.
you're already mourning a couple of things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, um, preemptively so that I don't feel rejected.
And I think that's natural as well. I think a lot of people don't spend the time knowing that it's okay to mourn certain things because life has changed. You're just not caught up to what the changes are just yet. So it's okay to mourn that party you don't get to go to anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially now that eventually you'll have two little ones. So it's not like you can give one to Joshua and say, I'll see you, in a couple of hours. It's two of them? What? Where are you going?
I mean, it's not like babysitters don't exist, but I think even just like the
At such a
first,
young age, though.
yeah, and even just
That's
like
going to
the
be a minute.
fact that you have kids, people just like assume, oh, they're not going to come or they're not going to want to come or whatever. So you just kind of like, I'm preparing myself to be left off of things, which is fine.
Oh,
There'll be new things.
there will be new things. And I think maybe because of a result of you having kids, maybe some of your other friends will start to have kids too.
Absolutely. And then they've
And that's
told us
part of
that
building
too.
a community.
Yeah, they've told us that as well.
I mean, that would be exciting to keep it a close knit circle because again, community is what you design, what you build, and I think we have as an LGBT community an opportunity now to impart into kids the next generation a lot of the things that was missing for us, right? The noise that we used to get in our earlier years for being gay, a lot of the commentary that you may or may not get, right, as a part of having a big platform on Instagram, but people all have opinions about nonsensical things that has no bearing on their lives. Like if you're not happy with it, go somewhere else. Like why are we talking about it?
Fair enough.
So my last question here, how do you deal with those that have something to say about your parental journey? And I know perhaps, I don't know, right? Maybe that becomes a little bit more prickly now that you're an actual dad and people have something to say about what you're doing. But how do you deal with that on a regular basis?
Um, Partly it's educating them because more than likely they just don't understand the situation, and if they do understand the situation, perhaps they wouldn't feel the same way. We don't get a lot of, or I don't get a lot of hate of just like being a gay dad with kids. Like I don't get a lot of that. It's what actually most of it is the treatment or the presumed treatment of international surrogates, and which is probably fair. I think there are documentaries and other things of surrogates and countries, including Mexico, who have been mistreated or underpaid or didn't receive the health care or whatever that surrogates in America may receive, or even just like assuming that they don't. And so a lot of that has been like me some self-reflection with me of like, I need to do some due diligence and actually find out what's going on because maybe these people are right. And but now that which I've kind of enjoyed that sort of it's making me accountable to what I'm putting other people through, uh,
Hmm.
and or asking them to do. And so I have enjoyed that, and I think that it's helping me and it's helping others. Like it's helping me to actually like, all right, let me double click into here and actually see what's going on and educate myself. Let me validate their concerns of like this does happen. You're not wrong, but you're making assumptions that aren't true. And here's what's going on in a just to a degree. Like it's like I'm not gonna like put my surrogate on blast of like her name or photo and things of like she didn't ask for this. And so it's tricky to have to keep some of that private, but at the same time educate and not look like some awful person. And so, um,
But there were some steps you took in order to ensure the comfort of your surrogate on this trip, right? And you I think you showcased a little bit of that in some of your posts. Am I incorrect?
no, you're right. Like there's a lot that we have done there. I will say though that there are things that, um, you just have to know when you're, or that we didn't know going into this journey. Like for example, we did not get to meet our surrogate via video call until the second trimester. The reasons for the agency doing that, I do not know, but that is their policy. And so that is something like if you're going to do this journey, like something to keep in mind. The other thing is that like until Dario's birth, we didn't have a direct line of communication to her. So everything was through the agency. And so you have to trust that they're telling you the truth, they're telling her the truth, and they're communicating. And so that's tricky and uncomfortable. However, now we have like, we've exchanged numbers, we WhatsApp and send things back and forth, and we do have that direct line of communication. And luckily for our second journey, we're here so early that we're developing an in-person relationship with our second surrogate along the
Oh,
way.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so like
That worked out that way.
yeah, it's very nice. So in some ways, it's like, yes, these are things that that are may not be everyone's cup of tea. Like if that's not the surrogacy journey you imagined having, a as a surrogate, you wouldn't sign up for this, and as an intended parent, you also wouldn't sign up for this. So this is a relationship where us as intended parents understanding that this is how it goes, and the surrogates understanding that that's how it goes on their side, and both parties agreeing to that. And every agency is going to have a different situation. We personally have enjoyed having the agency kind of be a concierge and middleman to bridge the gap there and also translate, frankly. And so that has been helpful in a way that I think like having just that direct relationship, maybe there were things that we wouldn't have thought of to ask or to talk about or things like that. So it's been helpful having them shepherd the relationship along the way. And now we can take it from here to do whatever both sides agree to. Um, all that to say, I try to give the benefit of the doubt to people who comment, try to educate them. And frankly, like I've built a community now that like sometimes I'm like, let me sit with it for 5 to 10 minutes and see what happens. And sometimes people just come to my defense for me and I don't have to worry about it. So like that's actually
Nice.
super helpful too. Cause it's like if I've explained a situation before, then I don't have to like really like do it. I can let them kind
Let
of
others do that are following you, and yeah, I like that. All right. My real this is my son calling me,
oh,
who is
okay.
in the house. All right. So my real last question, how unique is the fact that you have the opportunity to have two kids roughly deliver around the same time through surrogacy? Is that have you seen that somewhere else happen? But is that like can that be planned or is that really just happenstance?
So it's unique in the scheme of like people having kids in general. In terms of same sex surrogacy journeys, It's fairly common. In the US, what tends to happen is people will have twins through surrogacy, and so may implant or transfer one embryo from each father with a shared egg donor to one surrogate to carry twins. That carries an increased risk. And actually, in Mexico, you aren't allowed to transfer embryos of different genetic parents into one surrogate. So that was off the table in general. But that scenario is very common in the United States. At least I'm saying this based on the Instagram parents and families that I have seen. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm sure there's plenty of families that are not showcasing their life on social media. In terms of our specific journey, we have seen several who have done what we've done, sometimes to more success, meaning like babies within a couple of days of each other, sometimes with less success where they're like 6 to 9 months apart. We did have our first transfers a day apart for each surrogate, but the first transfer was unsuccessful for Joshua's journey. So that's why 2 months later we had the second transfer. So fairly common, but to slightly varying degrees of success and closeness to each other.
Perfect. Listen, Matt, I have learned so much just talking to you, and I've learned bits and pieces from everybody that I've talked to. Your journey is unique in the fact that you're sharing it in such great detail, which I think, and I'm sure there is a lot that you're not sharing, but what you have decided to share, I think is exactly what people need to be able to digest and find online as they start some of the journey. When I started my adoption journey, I couldn't find any resources, and that was roughly about 8-9 years ago. Now there is a lot more out there, and there's still space for more. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that and putting your life out there in the spotlight, and for Joshua showing his face every now and again. You guys are such an adorable couple, and I'm so excited to see what comes out of this parenting journey. Maybe we reconnect in a year when your kids are 12 feet tall and ready to go to high school. Life flies by kind of quick. But thanks again. This has been fantastic. I appreciate the time and you taking an hour out of your day in Mexico.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. And thank you for showcasing the voices of fathers and not fathers as well on your platform. So I think this is going to be a helpful resource for season 2 across all the intended parents and even just people wanting to learn how to be better parents. So I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, hearing it from people is a lot different than reading something. So there's that distinction. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Jamil. Bye.
Do it. You can never find somebody do it like me. I'ma turn it all the way up, cause it kamikaze. Go ahead and try, baby. You are gonna see that you'll never ever find somebody